We have Michael from Zero G. Zero G just had a very successful TGE. Michael, can you introduce Zero G? Tell us what you're building.
Absolutely. So the short version of it is that we're building the largest and fastest AI layer one. So it's a chain that's effectively purpose-built for on-chain AI applications. And AI itself is, let's just say, a heavy data consumer. It's like an extreme use case. And so the infrastructure we had to build had to be purpose-built because everything is about just massive scale and throughput. So the layer one itself is infinitely scalable, both on the TPS as well as the data throughput side. Then we have a storage network and a compute network to do anything AI related. Compute for things like inference, fine-tuning, pre-training, and the storage for storing your data, your models, and so on. So we call that together. Actually, there's a service marketplace too if you need specific services like data about extraterrestrial intelligence. Let's just say, as a silly example, but you could have that as a kind of data plugin. And then together, that entire system, we call the AI operating system or decentralized AI operating system.
Interesting. And what made you decide to build Zero G? Because I know prior to this, you had a few successful startups. You've been pretty deep in the space. So perhaps give us a little bit of color into your background before Zero G and then why you decided to build it.
Yeah, so when I started Zero G, I was still running my company Garden, which was a Y Combinator-backed company. At its height, it was a unicorn company. And I was kind of ready for something new. We were IPO ready with that company kind of in 2020, and we wanted to IPO 2021. And then COVID hit, and it was the business model was very affected. So then I was doing about 2-3 years of just crisis management, effectively. And I was like, this is not really fun. This is not what I signed up for, but I, as the founder, need to make sure the company kind of survives and then also has a successful exit at some point. And so after doing this for 2 years of crisis fighting, I was like, okay, I'm ready for some new, spiritual and intellectual challenge. And I just so happened to get a call from my classmate, Thomas, who I went to Stanford with maybe 10 years ago or so at that time, and maybe a little bit less. And he basically said like, hey, we did a bunch of deals in crypto together. I invested in a company called Conflux 5 years ago, and Ming and Fun are two of the best founders I've ever backed, technical founders I've ever backed. Are you interested in meeting with them? And so we spent 6 months together, did a bunch of co-founder dating, really enjoyed working with each other, phenomenal technical backgrounds, best engineers I've ever worked with. And I was like, doesn't matter what we start, let's just get started. And it literally started with the team. So this was like May of 2023. I moved to a board chair role at Garden and then kind of pushed Zero G along and then eventually sold Garden a few months later as well.
Okay. What were you doing at Garden? What was that company about?
So that company was more like a B2B well-being provider, if you will. We had a technology offering as well as a physical offering through service providers. So it's all about healthy lifestyle in the office, if you will. So healthy food, yoga, meditation, well-being service providers, all of that type of stuff. And we had pretty large customers like Amazon, Google, Apple. And so build it to a pretty significant revenue base. At its height, we had 650 people, 100 million in contracted ARR. So it became a very sizable company recognized in Silicon Valley. And we were all about like expanding internationally, going public and so on. And then COVID just intervened and everything went up and to the right until then. And then everything went down and to the left for quite a while. And then as we kind of survived COVID and rebuilt the base back up, and that was the right time to sell.
Yeah, that blows my mind because a workplace health company during COVID, like how did you guys survive? What was the strategy there?
Oh man, that was super rough. That was probably the toughest I had to experience as an entrepreneur and as a leader ever. So it was such a stark contrast. Literally March 4th, I remember we had a board meeting and we were like, hey, we're going to get IPO ready. It's going to be the best year ever. And then literally 3 weeks later, I'm laying off like 70% of the company. And it was just such a stark contrast. It's as if I was flying an airplane. All of a sudden, everything's pitch black, losing communication with the tower, engines burning, the crew is panicking, nobody knows what's going on, total uncertainty, and then I have to basically land the plane. And so that's literally what it felt like, and had to do all types of survival things. The team went from 650 people at its height to 35 people at its lowest towards the end of the year. We had to do multiple emergency fundraisers, and we basically had to take a view of the world saying that, well, maybe COVID will be over at the end of the year, and if it's not, then, well, we have to do more stuff. And so it was kind of like the step-by-step, everyday survival payroll mechanism. And it's just not fun. There's so many things we had to do that, like even sell hardware so we can get some cash flow to make like payroll at the end of the month while we wait for an investor check to come in. It was rough, but company survived. And then we built the revenue base back up and it got sold eventually to another player in the space. And so had a happy outcome in the end.
Yeah, that's brutal. Like I can't imagine a tougher entrepreneur story than having that sort of business during a pandemic, right? Like that's
yeah. But in retrospect, having learned a lot and having gone through like an extreme scenario like that, in contrast, everything else seems easy. And maybe not intellectually easy, or maybe not easy from a, like, here are the different components that need to work together. But from a just emotional and spiritual standpoint, having gone through this extreme scenario, everything else pales kind of in comparison. And so I've been super enjoying the Web3 journey, the intense pace of it, the intense learning that has to go into, not only do I have to stay relevant on the Web3 side, also on the AI side. And both of these spaces are moving super fast. And so, yeah, having had that experience, everything else in comparison doesn't seem that bad anymore. And I just can enjoy being, a second-time entrepreneur.
It's not as much of a brutal grind. So you basically had this dream team come together. You're trying to figure out what to build. How did you settle on what you're building right now?
Yeah, it was interesting because it started so much with the team itself. We were then searching for what's the right idea. And it had to be at the intersection of three things. So one, it had to be something we're passionate about. Two, it had to be something we have deep domain expertise about. And then three, it's something where we feel like it was a major unlock for the space. And initially we looked at ideas like, well, maybe some type of bridging technology because we are unhappy users of all this type of stuff. But what was happening then, there was a defining moment for us, is we saw ChatGPT 3's rise. And that gave us a very clear signal saying that, oh, wow, there's something big happening here for AI. If we think 10 years from now, and AI is actually going to be used in major societal level systems like airports and manufacturing facilities and school systems and so on, how do we ensure that AI actually stays safe? And how do we ensure that more people reap the benefits of AI versus being displaced by AI? And so then we said, okay, well, there's this black box AI system right now where only a few basically benefit. And then how do we build something that's the opposite to that? And we call that decentralized AI. And that's when we started building all these different components. Started with the DA layer, then we built this, well, actually the storage layer was first. Then on top of that, we built the DA layer. Then we had the layer one, then we had the compute layer, then we had the service marketplace, then we had the AI alignment nodes. And so kind of built things up step by step.
Interesting. So I guess what you saw was like, hey, how do you actually bring AI on chain? And then you realize that the tech stack for that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, exactly. And way too slow. Way too slow. I mean, when we started, Ethereum's data throughput rate was about 80 kilobytes per second. It's probably faster at this point. I haven't checked recently, but I think maybe closer to a megabyte. I'm not entirely sure. But with that type of throughput, how can you run AI intense applications? Modern data centers do like hundreds of gigabytes, terabyte plus. So we then needed to bridge that gap. And so we found a way to create an architecture that scales, that's parallelizable, and actually reaches those levels of performance.
And would you say your goal with Zero G or your vision is that everything that is AI related runs on chain, it's completely verifiable, or do you view it as still like there's a strong element of off-chain compute?
I think different use cases can actually utilize different types of AI models. So let's say you're doing a research report or you're ordering a pizza. That can still be centralized AI because the risk of something going haywire there is still relatively low. And even if you have a personal assistant, that could be an edge type of AI model, for example, as long as it can connect to the internet and so on. But if it becomes to like mission critical infrastructure, as I said, factories, logistics systems, governance systems, administrative systems, where you actually want to verify what's happening underneath the hood, then it has to be built on decentralized AI rails. And so that's how I see it. Of course, you can build everything fully decentralized and verifiable, but there'll be certain types of applications where maybe it doesn't justify the additional cost.
That makes sense, right? Like it's kind of like certain use cases doesn't really matter. Do you see a world where a full model just runs on chain, like a full, because you have these massive models that are currently running essentially they're completely centralized, but do you see that happening?
Yeah, it could certainly happen. I mean, the thing that'll always be required is you need heavy, very quick data infrastructure, and then you need the GPU compute layer to do inference and so on. So you could see foreseeably a future where all of the validators have really high-end graphic cards, for example, and can also run kind of a model fully on chain. I guess that'll be a question of if a transaction is as cheap as a database call, then theoretically, yes, you can run it fully on chain, but you're likely going to lose something. And that aspect will be like full decentralization. I don't think that can be done across, 100,000 nodes globally distributed with whatever compute infrastructure you want. I think we'll have to give up some sense of decentralization for that.
And currently, what are kind of the major use cases you're seeing on zero G, right? Like, because you started with a DA layer. I remember back in the day when I think it was probably a year and a half ago that we were doing some consulting with you guys. It was mostly focused on this kind of both the storage side and the data, I guess like the data availability side, right? But now it's kind of expanded a lot beyond that. So what are the use cases that are currently available and you're seeing online right now?
It's pretty diverse. We've had 300 plus kind of companies and ecosystem partners build on us. And so some of them are decentralized federated learning, for example. If you want to build a model where you keep your own data safe or private, actually, your own data safe and private, other people have their own data that needs to be safe and private, and you can still train a model through this approach of decentralized federated learning. So there's like a company called Volcanium Labs that's doing that. There's a company like Avinasi that's utilizing AI agents to do research on longevity, for example. So those are cool use cases. There's a company called Dormant AI, which looks at your biometric data and then gives you recommendations kind of for health. And there's kind of many more. If you need like a privacy layer on top of storage, there's like Beacon Protocol that's building it. There's AAA games that are utilizing non-playable NPC characters in their games. So it's pretty wide-ranging. And that just highlights that AI will integrate into all of the facets of our life eventually. It's kind of like the internet back in the day. Every company became an internet company eventually. And then similarly with AI, I think there'll be some AI components, whether it's payments for AI agents, where you're like, hey, agent, go do this thing for me, pay my bill, whatever. And then that agent connects with another agent, and then they figure out the billing components. You get built on, hopefully it's crypto. Hopefully it's your wallet that's being used. And yeah, there'll be some facet of that that's going to be on chain and utilized.
I'd love to go a bit deeper into the agents use case around agents paying each other.
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing that's important there is you need to understand a sense of ownership of the agent, because if you have a sovereign agent and it's going rogue, that's a big issue. So ideally you have some type of ownership level that's ideally with some type of human or maybe another agent. And we've enabled that by building this thing called an INFT. It stands for Intelligent NFT. And so for the first time, we've embedded the private keys of an AI agent into the metadata of the NFT, meaning that if you hold that INFT, that agent then belongs to your wallet. And so anything the agent does belongs to you as well. If it provides some economic output, if it does payments, it's all doing it in your kind of sense. The second part that you then need is some type of payment protocol, because you need to find a way of connecting. And ideally there's some standards, because if you say like send money and the other person or the other agent sees it as receive money, it's going to wait for you to, or actually it says that this would also be paying money to that other agent, then they're just going to cross their wires effectively. So some type of payment protocol needs to be established, and we're looking at a few standards right now. So we haven't picked a specific standard around it, but I think we're pretty close to making a decision on that. But then you have the payment rails, the ownership piece, and then there needs to be some type of alignment too, because things can go wrong. Agents can hallucinate, there's model drift, maybe there's a human in the loop that tries to hijack the transaction. There's a bunch of things. And so some economic incentive layer as well, so that if something does go wrong, we do slash resources or effectively don't withhold an incentive. Because some of the kind of studies that people have done, like Anthropic has done a study where they had an AI agent manage a store. And after, I forgot exactly what the timeline is, but a few days maybe, or 24 hours, it doesn't matter, the agent was bankrupt because people were just like tricking that agent. It's like, hey, this should actually be for free. I'm an employee here. Like, why are you charging me? It's like, oh yeah, you're right. Here you go. And so there's some aspect of that alignment piece as well. So these agents can't be like tricked. And so we need all of that infrastructure and provide that through the zero-G ecosystem so that that can happen in a high velocity way consistently.
Interesting. And I do remember seeing some sort of study that basically showed that, hey, with these AI agents, they're susceptible to prompt injection kind of attacks. How do you protect against that?
There's decentralized ways of having security. We, for example, wrote one research paper and looking specifically at centralized federated learning. And we're able to, no matter what the security framework was, insert poison data into it. But you can solve that by decentralized federated learning and doing verification consistently. And so, yeah, some type of verification layer around that is pretty important.
Mm-hmm. And is that verification layer, is that also part of, I guess, Zero G's product suite, or is that separate?
On the kind of agent-specific behavior side, we're planning to have the AI alignment nodes play that role, but we haven't designed the mechanisms for that yet. So I think that's going to take a while, maybe 6 to 12 months before we have something that gets us to something that's actually reasonable and people can use for even very secure and, let's say, $1 million plus transactions.
I think that's like one of the issues we see right now with AI agents, especially like DeFi AI agents, right? Is you have this whole aspect of security, which is still a bit unclear. I've seen some teams like Almanac have basically this approach of having these AI managed strategies, but still using smart contracts very heavily. I'm curious on your thoughts on that, how you view that approach.
Yeah, I mean, smart contracts are effectively, you can't modify them from an AI agent standpoint. And so code as law in that case. So it makes a lot of sense that you still go through a smart contract layer for that. Because sometimes, depending on the model that you use, there's going to be hallucinations, there's going to be model drift over time. And just in general, there's no 100% certainty given the statistical nature of these models that everything will be done correctly. That being said, having smart contracts, I think, is a much more secure way of going about it. And we actually work with Almanac and also Octane for security level things. So definitely love both of those teams.
Interesting. I guess my first instinct when I hear, okay, using these smart contracts is that it perhaps creates a lot more rigidity, I guess, with these agents. Or do you,
I mean, it depends on what you offload to the smart contract. Is it as much as like, hey, this smart contract is like this last step as part of a payment process? Like, hey, we agreed to the terms. All you need to do is just insert those terms and the smart contract executes. Or is it super restrictive where it's like describing the entire business logic as well? And so I would be much more pro for leaner, like very clear, easy to use smart contracts versus these like really large like business logic ones. Because the business logic you can, I think, figure out with the agents and then you just cement that relationship through the smart contract.
What are some DeFi AI use cases on Zero G that you're very excited about that people can play around with right now?
Yeah, so for example, there's an AMM DEX called Jane. They're using AI for rebalancing of the LP positions so that you have less impermanent loss and you have to do less of the rebalancing if you have very tight kind of LP pools. So that's one use case. There's another company called Replicats that's building kind of trading agents and portfolio management agents. I think there's some people that are building agents to access our compute and our storage systems as well. So it's like really easy to have prompts. I think we even have a MCP server where you can easily connect and then use other agents to interact with that MCP server. So a bunch of different use cases, and they're going to keep growing, of course.
The most exciting thing about AI right now that I feel like is relevant to crypto is DeFi AI. That's cool to see these kind of like use cases where agents are basically improving efficiency.
Yeah, it's natural. I mean, Web3 has a liquidity layer, and that's one of the draws of people coming into the space. So it's very natural that would happen.
Exactly. What's coming up next for Zero G? I know you had the airdrop, the TGE. You also have the DAT that launched recently as well. Just a huge bunch of announcements or big things that have happened recently. What else is coming down the line in the next few months?
Yeah, now you know I haven't slept very much the last 2 weeks, but right now it's very much focused on so I keep telling the team it's day one. Like now we can see what's real. We have a mainnet. There's not going to be a lot of Sybil as a result of it. All the metrics are real. We can measure metrics over time. We can see real activity. We can see user growth, account growth, all of those things. So now it's very important to build the ecosystem. And I think about it as 4 different layers. 1 is the liquidity layer. 2 is the application layer. 3 is the research and technology layer. And then on the bottom is the kind of decentralized governance layer, if you will. So we're one of the first companies to have a Duna, for example, for the governance piece and have a security council as part of that reviews and proposes protocol upgrades, and very excited about having that now be part of the ethos of the protocol. We have to focus on those 4. And then the ideal outcome is that we'll just build a very large, vibrant ecosystem that when you enter as a builder, you get a competitive advantage because there's network effects from other builders. and we have the resources to support you, and we have the marketing resources to support you to accelerate everything about your journey, basically.
It's interesting what you said about signal versus noise, because I think that's what a lot of teams struggle with pre-TGE is they really struggle to figure out, okay, what's the actual use cases here versus people trying to farm, right? And so that's a great point, which is that, hey, this is actually day one, and you've kind of cleared out a lot of the, I guess, like the noise here, and now you can really just focus on actual like usage and metrics and so on. But crypto's incentive, so I think there's going to be multiple levels of that, right? Like you'll have dApps that are deploying on 0G that are going to have their own, like people are going to use them because they see a potential upside. But on your end, how do you personally see the best way to navigate that for an early stage product?
Yeah, I mean, in life, everything is incentives. I actually wrote a little article about that on X as well, so definitely check that out too. But I think if you even look at the Web 2 world, if you look at AWS and Google Cloud, they kind of lure people in by saying like, oh, I'll give you 300,000 worth of free credits, which are attached to like 80-90% gross profit margins, of course. So is it really 300,000 that they're spending? Not really, but it is a big incentive for people to come in and experiment with the ecosystem and then build their infrastructure. And so likewise, we have to have an incentive layer initially. So we have an ecosystem program that's 88.8 million, for example, and we have a few initiatives. One is Guild on 0G, which is all about building dApp. We have hackathons, we have accelerators, which are much more hands-on. And so we already had a few success cases coming out of it. Like Carve was part of the first batch. At the height, there were $1 billion project launched on Bybit and Upbit, and then Plays Out, which launched on Binance. I think at the height was around 300 million as well. So already seeing some great success stories out of the ecosystem. And I think post incentives, it's really about intrinsic motivation. Like, do you vibe with the culture? Do you believe that AI should be a public good? If yes, then there's no other place to build but 0G. And so I hope to attract a lot of intrinsically motivated builders as well, because they just know this is the right path for the future, and this is where AI needs to head. And then there's a whole BD effort as well about trying to attract people that we think will be essential on the chain, and they won't be able to build certain features unless it's on 0G as well, to really have them be like a showcase for what's possible. And so, yeah, those three things I would say would be kind of our initial layer and approach.
Interesting. I didn't know you were involved with Carve as well as Plays Out on 0G's front. I mean, shout out to Paul and Jasim. Those guys are killer. But yeah, that's really cool. So it also seems like basically builders can choose how to work with 0G on different aspects because you have these different solutions of different products, right? So it's not like you have to take the whole stack. It's kind of like you can also choose certain pieces of it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's modular by nature. So if you want to build on a different chain for the execution environment, but want to use our storage and compute, totally fine. For example, the DAT, one of the anchor investors is DFDV, which was actually the first Solana DAT in existence. And that basically built a bridge into the Solana ecosystem where they can still use our compute and our storage for actually deploying some AI applications there if they wanted to. And so we believe very much in collaboration rather than just like pure like competition like in the Web 2 space.
Yeah, and that's actually a really great way to do it because these chains won't necessarily view you as competition, but more so as a partner to fill in gaps. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Michael, thanks for joining today. I know you've been just doing interview after interview, so appreciate it. Do you have any last words, anything, perhaps a call to action for our viewers here?
Yeah, please follow us on our socials. So you can find all of them for 0G on 0G.ai. Also follow me on X. I'm pretty active there, Michael H_0G. So hope to see you there. Hope to interact with you. Going to be a lot of fun to build the ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks for joining.